Hello and welcome to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller, a podcast where we think about everyday life, living with more purpose and looking at the ups and downs of the stuff of life. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about a question that is often asked in the interview situation and often gets people into a bit of a tiz, or they don't do a very good job of answering it. The question I want us to focus on is, why should we hire you? It's nearly always asked in interview, and it's a really important question, actually. Why should we hire you? It's a moment for you to actually use a prepared answer, something you've really thought about, rather than just responding to something that's a little bit more out of your control or a scenario-based question that you can't necessarily prepare for. But it is a question that's full of challenges. The first challenge is that when you are in an interview, there are two key aims of an interview, whatever question you're being asked and whatever interview you're in. And the first is you need to stand out. And the second important thing is you need to sound honest. Those are really, really important. That's exactly what you're looking for. I need to stand out from everybody else, but I also need to sound honest. And so when you come into this question, how do you handle standing out and sounding honest? And so there's a few ways this can go. Some people will answer the why should we hire you question, or what makes you a good candidate, and they will totally overdo it. They will over-egg it. They will make them sound so perfect or so brilliant and so exceptional that it doesn't sound honest, or it sounds like behaviourally there's a bit of a strong ego. And in lots of workplaces and on lots of panels, that is not going to work. I'm sure most of the people listening, all of you, that would not be the category you fall into, but it does happen. The other problem is you could also underrepresent yourself and actually just not say what is true about you. So you actually have an opportunity to speak about the things that you are and you do well, and you don't take that opportunity because you're so worried about sounding like you've got an ego that you actually go the other way and just don't really say anything that they can hook onto or that really represents who you are. You're underplaying yourself. And I would imagine there's lots of people listening who would fall into that category. There's a third thing you can do is that you could answer the question with some level of detail, but it just doesn't sound very compelling. It falls into this like very nebulous, very vague, very generic, very sort of, AI generated, something that just does not help reflect the nuance of you. And the problem with that is you've answered the question, but the number one reason that we are in interview is to stand out. And nebulous and vague doesn't stand out. And when you are somebody who's sat in an interview panel, which I have lots and lots of times in lots of different situations in my work life, off the pat answers start to just sound the same. And what you want is to do something that makes that person sit up, listen and take notice of you, or to make connection with you in a way that feels truthful, honest, genuine, all of those things. And what's great about this question, as I've said already, it is a question you can prepare for. It is something that you can do some thought around. You can have one aspect of this that you are ready with because you know who you are, and another aspect that you can prepare specifically for because you work out about the company or organisation that's interviewing you. So I'm going to give you a few tips around how we can do this better so that we don't over-egg it and sound ridiculous, we don't underdo it and underrepresent ourselves, and we don't fall into this generic, nebulous, vague, beige description that just doesn't make anybody pay attention to you. Everybody has something that is unique and brilliant to say. Every single person listening. So if you're listening to this and you think, well, I am a bit nebulous and vague and beige, that's just not true. You just haven't had anybody help you see. You haven't done the work to help you see differently. I would love to help you with that if I can, if that you're listening and you feel like that. So that is just not true about anybody. So let's think about some of the preparation we can do as we think about this question. Why should we hire you? Or what makes you a great candidate for this role? Something like that. Or even what are your strengths? So the first thing to think about, especially with the why should we hire you question, is that it's not the story of me, it's the story of us. I think this is a really helpful point. I was doing some research in preparation for this podcast, and that was a tip that was given, and I thought that was really good. If you go with the I am this, I am that, I am the world, I've won an award for this, I've done this, I've done that. It doesn't sound like you're trying to connect who you are to the role or why they should hire you. You're just reeling off your accolades. And that sort of separates you and sounds like the story of me, which is not what they're looking for, actually. Rarely do people want to hear the story of me. They want to hear the story that's connected to who they are. That's a really important lesson in storytelling. So as you're preparing, hold in your head the connection to the organisation, to the company, to them as you're talking. Okay. And I think what's important to understand is that they're asking you this question because what they are interested in is, are you what we're looking for? And are you somebody who knows yourself and knows your strengths and talents? That's what they're looking for. And if you're not what they're looking for, that is okay. If you really know who you are and you can answer this question well, and that is not what they're looking for, then that is a relief for everybody. You don't want that job. So actually, becoming generic or nebulous or trying to fit every box is not good advice for this. Because if you do that, or you say you're something that you're not, or it's like me going into an interview and saying you should hire me because I can see that you're an organisation that is absolutely committed to attention to detail, and that is definitely something that I can bring to the table. Well, that's just not true. Attention to detail is not me. And so if I say that and they go, oh, good, we'd love to have you, I'm going to let them down and I'm going to hate it. So be honest about who you are, but look for ways to see how you can connect it to what they are looking for. So let's go through a few things that you can do in preparation for this. The first thing you can think about is your strengths. What a surprise I was going to say that. If you're new to this podcast and you don't know much about me, my training as a coach and the work I do with companies and individuals is all based around people knowing their true strengths, their individual talents. I am a passionate advocate of the fact that everybody has unique strengths and talents. I believe that there are things you can do that you can do at least better than 10,000 other people. There are things that you have a natural tendency toward that you may be underestimating that other people just find much more difficult than you. And I would encourage you in preparation for any interview to know your strengths. If you have not been through that process, if you do not know your Clifton strengths or any other personality profile that's based around the strengths philosophy, you need to do that. You need that in your life because it will fill your database with so much accurate information on yourself that you can draw from. And if you don't have that, it's very difficult to do. You end up moving, like I said before, to that generic answer like team player and great problem solver or all that kind of stuff that everybody says. We need to take it a level further than that and know and understand what our strengths and talents are. So if that's part of the preparation, to have a good understanding of what your strengths are. And you know, when somebody gets accurate and someone gets specific and they speak articulately, if that's a word, about this, people sit up and listen. If I'm sitting on a panel and someone gives me some accurate reflections on the strengths and talents that they have, they don't overplay it or underdo it, but it's specific, I'm going to listen into that. And I'm going to find that fascinating and interesting to hear because it will help me see what about them stands out. And the very nature of having something that stands out means that it's not everything. You can't stand out in all areas. You have to get specific and mention what those things are. So get exact, get accurate, get specific. Do not say something like, I'm a good project manager. Say, I've got experience of managing complex initiatives and ensuring project goals are clear and achieved by deadline. That is so much better. Don't say, I'm good at presenting. Instead say, I'm somebody who is a accomplished storyteller that finds ways to connect with my audience in many different environments. I've just made those up off the top of my head, but get more specific than those wide statements that are useful, but they're not as compelling as something that's more specific. There's something around niching and being generic, which is it's actually a conversation that businesses have. Should we niche? Should we get specific about what we're trying to do? Or should we try and meet everyone's needs? And as a small business, it's something that I really stress over, because I think, if I niche too much, I'm going to lose business. There's going to be people who don't want to work with me. But all the evidence suggests that the more you niche and get clear on who you're speaking to, the more they sit up and listen and respond. So niche down on who you are, get clear, and get a few sentences together. Use something like a strengths report to help you, so that you can speak really confidently. I work with people on the purpose pursuit so that they get really good at this. Part of what they do is build some of these unique sentences and statements so that they've got them as a bank to refer to. It's the work you have to do beforehand, so you've got it to just pull out your back pocket and feel very comfortable talking about. And it feels genuine and honest because it's true. You know it's true because you've done the work and you've had the feedback. So alongside that, the next thing as well as strengths is the concept of alignment. Okay, I want to talk about alignment. When you are talking about yourself, you need to have done the work to understand how it aligns to the people that you're speaking to the company, to the organisation, whoever they might be. You need to think about how it aligns to their mission, how it aligns to their culture, and obviously how it aligns to the non-negotiable aspects of the job description. That's really, really important. So you can have your bank of statements that you've thought about, but you've got to pull on the things that particularly lean into mission, culture, job description. This is how you make it the story of us rather than the story of me, by doing this bit of work. So the mission is the stuff that they're trying to do, the things that they're trying to achieve. How do your strengths and talents allow that mission to come about? If there is a mission for doubling the size of the company in 5 years, and you've got strengths in futuristic thinking, or you're brilliant at reaching new people or getting to know new people, you connect those ideas to the idea of growing the business, because you're going to grow the thinking, or you're going to grow the connections in the network. Connect it to that. So align it with the mission of the organisation, and there's always a way to do that. You also want to align it with the culture. Do some work looking at this organisation's culture. It's quite easy to find by looking at some clues on a website. That what is the stuff they're talking about? How does it look like they deal with people? What are some of the words and language that they're using? Use that language back with them and align your strengths and talents and the person that you are, and how that contributes to building the culture that they're looking for. If they've got a no-fuss, hard work culture, you've got to show how your strengths are going to align with that. If they've got a everyone gets to play culture, you've got to show how your strengths align with that. Find a way to show how they fit. And by the way, if they really feel like they don't fit, think hard about whether you want to work there. There's nothing wrong with a culture being no fuss and hard work. But if that's not what you are not going to enjoy it. And if you do go there, you're going to have to put a time limit on how long you're there, and perhaps it's just for some experience. Go in with your eyes open and understand what it's going to involve. And then obviously, as I've said, you need to align it with the job description. That sounds really obvious, but it's really important. It doesn't need to be every bit of the job description, but pick a couple of the non-negotiable items on there and show how who you are will get that done. There's more than one way to meet the job description. Different personalities, talent, skills, experiences can do that. So you need to look at how you specifically can do that. And with evidence, if you're able to. Be as strong as you can in the way that you explain that. Now, it's all well and good having the data to show who you are and to show how it's aligned. So we've got our strengths and we've thought about how it aligns. But there's a really important third aspect, which is I've called excitement. It's so important. You can do it in your way with your personality, but you do need to convey a sense of enthusiasm, excitement, interest in what this role has, or the mission, or the goals and objectives you're working towards. It's really crucial. you need to, as I would say to my husband, you need to tell your face. Like if you're somebody who's a more internal processor, you have got to make it abundantly clear to the people that are interviewing you that you are enthusiastic, passionate, whatever that passion looks like. It could be a quiet little fire or it could be a loud fire. You've got to show a way or make a way to get that point across. What is it you're particularly excited by? Tell them. Because if somebody's a senior stakeholder in a business, they care. They should care anyway. And they want you to. So get that across in the conversation. It really matters. And, you know, as somebody who has my own business, somebody being bothered about what we're trying to do and being excited by what we're trying to do matters hugely to me. More so than actually having all of the boxes ticked in experience. Because that stuff can be learned. You can't make somebody want to come and get involved in what you do. But if you've got some of that natural excitement or energy around it, convey that to the people that you're talking to. And if you're on online and your interview's on Zoom, you're going to have to work even harder. I present on Zoom a lot and I'm very happy to, but you have to go another notch up to make sure that what's lost over the airwaves is communicated. So you need to just go that little bit more with what you're saying and doing to make it really clear. I don't mean you have to go wild and start using jazz hands. That's not what I'm saying. But just be aware that you might have to convey it with a bit more clarity because of the lack of being in the room with that person. So we've got strengths. We've thought about those. We've considered how we're going to get more specific. We've got aligning with mission, culture, job description, just doing that hard work of mapping it out. I've talked about excitement, and then I just want to give you a bit more about the actual content that you can put in there. Okay, so the content of the answer to this question could include a few things. As I've said, it can include the connection to the culture. It can include your experiences, some things that you've actually done and been involved with that correlate really well with what this organisation needs to do next. It can be in a completely different environment, but it can correlate. The unique skills that you have, things that you've learned to do, as well as your natural strengths and talents, your passion. Try and keep your examples as current as you can. You know, it's okay to pull on things from like 15 years ago, but if you've got things that are more current, it definitely lands better to use those things. And as much as you possibly can, use their words. If there are some words or language that you've noted in the job description or you've seen on their website or you've seen in the paperwork, use their words back to them. It's a way of creating connection and it's a way of showing that you've done your homework and that you want to imbibe and be part of the culture of the workplace that you're wanting to join. And I also want to say that you can use examples from all of your life. I mean, some of the examples are useful to be from work. But actually, for those of you who are listening to this, who have been out of the workplace for any period, use the whole of your life. If you've got some good examples of how you've put this to work, do not minimise anything that you've done in a voluntary capacity or in any other aspect of your life and bring those to the table if you need to and if that helps you. And really do understand that in those years that you've been in those places, you have been growing your strengths, you've been growing your talents. They have not been stagnant, they haven't been forgotten. So with confidence, go back to thinking about that person that you are and the strengths that you have. And as I've said already, get as specific as you can so that it's compelling and something that somebody wants to listen to. The final point on the kind of what to include in this question, why should we hire you, what makes you a great candidate, is you just need to do a little bit of practice. I don't mean practice so that it sounds like an off-the-pat answer, because actually this should be tailored to different jobs and different circumstances. But you want to land it. And if you're going to land something, there are some parts of it that you will need to ensure that you include. You need to ensure that you've got some key points that you want to make. And one of the things I've learned from successful interviews is that when you're giving an answer that's a bit longer, round it off well. Round it off with a little bit of a summary, like a too long, don't read. So if I've told you a bit of a narrative, don't let that get too long, by the way. Do make sure that you come into land with the key points of what that was all about and what you were trying to say. So it's really clear that you finished and that you lead them back. You signpost essentially what they need to hear. We need to do signposting and not assume that it's obvious to the interviewer that they're going to hear what you wanted them to. So really do make things as clear as you can through a bit of practice. I just wanted to touch on another question that often goes with this. So as well as the whole what are your strengths, which I hope we've covered well enough in this, sometimes we get asked what are your weaknesses? And this question is another one that can be quite tricky, especially if you've not thought about it. And I've some really good pointers I want to give you around this. Do not say an annoying thing like that your weakness is that you are a perfectionist or that your weakness is that you're a workaholic. Don't say those things. They wind people up. They're basically what they call a bit of a subtle flex. What you're saying there is, my weaknesses are that I'm going to really do better than everybody else and try really, really hard. Or my weakness is that I'm going to just kill myself for the sake of this business because I'm so productive and so hardworking and you want me. So they're not really weaknesses. Don't do that. It can feel aggravating and a bit grating, especially if somebody doesn't know you. It could be true that you're a perfectionist and it could be true that you're a workaholic. This is not the moment for those revelations. It just doesn't land well. Okay, so that's my first tip to you. The second tip is to try and think about something that is a challenge for you. So you can answer by saying something that I'm recognizing is a challenge for me is this particular skill that I might need. Now, there will be behaviours that you're working on, okay? I've got behaviours that I'm working on. There are several things that I do that are behavioural traits that are weaknesses in me. I don't think your first conversation interview is the time to go into all of that. It will come up in time in your one-to-ones with your line manager in supportive, trusting environments where you are known and appreciated. They don't know you yet. So if you say something to them like, yeah, one of my behavioural traits is that I'm really sensitive and I take everything personally. The problem with choosing that as your weakness in interview is it sounds like a personality trait that can be really difficult to change. So my encouragement to you is to be honest and to pick a real weakness that's perhaps a bit more connected to a skill or a talent that you need to develop a bit. So it could be like, for example, I'm not that experienced in using this particular piece of software, or my understanding of data needs a bit more experience, but I'm really keen to learn from people who know what they're doing. And as you tell them what that weakness is and what the consequence of that might be, make sure that you also tell them that you're willing to learn. And that's why I would, in this scenario, it is not insincere to not tell them your biggest behavioural problem. This is an interview. It's important that you're honest about a weakness you have or a gap that you have, and that it's not so small and inconsequential that you sound ridiculous and insincere, but that it's something you could work on. So I think a really good example, could be, I want to get more and more comfortable with understanding data and trends. I recognise that a consequence of that could be that it takes me a bit longer to get my head around the figures, but I would really love some support with that. And I would hope that in an organisation like this, there might be some people or some courses I can go on that can help me understand data and numbers more completely than I do. That doesn't make me go alarm bells, difficult member of staff. If I said, actually, I'm quite sensitive, which, by the way, I am, I'm not a difficult member of staff, but I wouldn't want to lead with that at my interview with total strangers. So my advice to you is pick a skill rather than a deep behavioural thing that you're working on for this particular environment. And don't say, I'm a perfectionist, I'm a workaholic, because they just sound like what my son would call a subtle flex, and they're not helpful and don't make you sound sincere. As I said before, we want to stand out for all the right reasons, but we want to sound honest and we want to sound sincere. And then the other question that we get asked in interviews, just as a little bit of a bonus, is there anything that you want to ask us? I've honestly gone into that before and not been able to think, and I can normally think on my feet. So again, I think it's really good to prepare for this. Try and let it be something that you're actually genuinely interested in. Don't ask them about pay or leave or paid leave or policies. This is, again, not the moment. Those things are important. You do need to ask those questions. Don't ask them in interview, because what the other person hears is you just want to know what's in it for you. So there are loads of things you could ask that you could be genuinely interested in. Like, I'd love to know a bit more about how the values of the organisation are expressed. Which of the values are most important to you, do you think? what did the person before do with this role, and where did they take it, and where can you imagine it going in the next 5 years? Can you tell me a bit about the team I'm going to be working with? What does success look like for this organisation over this year or over the next 5 years? Which of the goals that you've got are you most excited about? What are you most excited about the company's future? What am I not asking you that I should? That's a really good question. I liked that one. So those are all questions you could ask that spark some conversation and interest, but don't make you sound like you're being inauthentic, and also don't also make you sound like you're just actually wanting to ask about the ins and outs of the job description, which actually can be found out after this moment in time. So if you keep in mind that when you're being asked these questions, there is this twofold principles of the stand out and sound honest, but then there is the tell the story of us. So that means you're talking about who you are, but you're trying to align it to where that organisation is going. You can't go wrong. The bit of prep you need to do is to understand the job description, get a bit of info around the mission and culture, and weave that into the pre-prepared stuff that you can use for every job interview, because you know your strengths, you know your talents, that's all up to date in your mind. And you weave it in to make it more individualized for each setting. And if you do that work and you do it with a genuine, I want to express to you who I am, it will really land in a way that makes the interviewers sit up, pay attention and think, we'd really like this person on our team. And as I said at the start, if they don't want you because of what you've said that's true and honest, it's not the right place for you to work anyway. So don't try and make yourself fit into something that's just not going to work, because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a disaster one way or another, or both ways. I hope that's been useful to you. We're going to talk a little bit more around issues around, the workplace and how we handle ourselves in interview situations and other things as the episodes go by. If you found this useful, or you know somebody who's about to go for a job interview, please forward on this episode, because it's full of stuff that can help someone really prepare well. And if you are listening and about to go for an interview, I wish you all the best. I hope you get it.